Welcome my dear students to yet another session of chapter number 5, that is the fundamental unit of life, and the fundamental unit of life is cell. Basis of cellular organization, all the living organisms can be divided into two categories, that is unicellular organisms and multicellular organism. If a living organism is made up of only one type of cell, then that living organism will be called as unicellular living organism. The examples are Chlamydomonas, amoeba, paramecium, etc. Other organisms which are made up of so many types of cells or more than one type of cell, they all are called as multicellular organisms like we human being. Irrespective of unicellular or multicellular organisms, the cells perform basic similar functions for their survival. Whether it is a cell of a unicellular amoeba or a cell of a human being, all these types of cells perform basic similar type of functions. So what are these functions? These functions are providing energy, generating energy. There are certain cell organelles which are present in all the cells, and each organelle has its particular function. So that function will remain same in all the living organism, whether it is a unicellular living organism or a multicellular organism. Let us go through once again towards the gadgets to study the cells. Cells are too small to be seen with the naked eyes. You cannot visualize the cells with naked eyes because they are very small in size. They are studied with the help of microscope. Microscopes are high resolution instruments that are used for observing fine details of very small object. Two common types of microscopes are shown here. Light microscope, which is shown here, and electron microscope, which is shown here in other side of this slide. So electron microscope is the advanced one which has a higher magnification power, whereas the light microscope is the simple compound microscope in which the source of light is used to visualize the object. Shape and size of cells. Shape and size of cells may vary, but all of these are ultimately determined by the specific function. If you will see different types of cells in plants, animals, you will see that there are various types of cells. There are different types of cell in your brain. There are different types of cell in your blood. There will be different types of cell in your intestine. So at different places in your body, different types of cells are there. Similarly, if you will see plant tissue, there also you will see different types of cells. So this variety is there in the living beings, but what factor decides that what will be the shape and size of the cell? What is the deciding factor on the basis of which different types of cells acquire different shape, different size, etc. Some cells can change their shapes like amoeba, WBCs, but plant and animals have almost fixed shape. WBCs are white blood cells which have the tendency of changing their shape. Like amoeba keeps on changing its shape, it forms the pseudopodia, and this helps in the movement and engulfing of food for amoeba. In the same way, WBCs which are present in us are also capable of changing their shape. But rest all cells in plants and animals are almost fixed in their shape. The smallest cell is PPLO, which is mycoplasmas, and the largest cell is ostrich egg. Here in this slide you can see different types of cells. Red blood cell is shown here, which has a biconcave structure. Muscle cells are there, which have tapering ends or narrow ends, and you can see that it has a remarkable shape, that it is broadened in the center, and these are spindle shape, and these spindle shapes are present in the muscles. Then you can see leaf pore guard cells which have kidney bean shape. You can see nerve cells which have a specific type of structure, And then you can see paramecium, which has a different type of structure. Then you can also see diatoms here. The scale of life, the shape of cells is also very different in different living organisms. It can be very small, like 1 nanometer in case of small molecules. Then it can be 100 nanometer in case of T2 fish, and it can be 1 mm in fish egg, and it can be bigger also. So this slide is just to show you that there is a wide range in the shape of cell. Some cells are very small, whereas other cells are very bigger in size. So cell is a basic unit of life. It performs all life functions like intake of food materials, excretion, metabolism, respiration, irritability, etc. And there is one more very remarkable feature in cell, that is they show division of labor. Children, do you know what is division of labor? Division of labor means when so many people are there, or so many living organisms are living at one place, and different group of living organism has different function to perform. You can see a honeybee comb, and honeybee comb is a best example of division of labor. You know, in honeybee comb there is one queen. There are males which are called as drones. Then there are worker bees. So the work of each and every type of honeybee is divided. In the same way, in your body also, in your cell also, division of labor is seen. Cells usually possesses a number of components inside them, and these components are called as cell organelles. What does they call? Cell organelles, or the organs of cell, you can say. So organ of cell is what? Cell organelles. Organ of cell is not a scientific word. This is just for your understanding purpose, that what are these cell organelles? Cell organelles are the small organs, small structures which are present inside the cell. Each organelle inside the cell perform different specific function. These functions can be clearing waste material, protein synthesis, lipid synthesis, transportation of some material, generation of energy. So there are different organelles which perform different functions within the cell. So let us focus on to the differences between unicellular and multicellular living organism. Unicellular living organisms are made up of only one cell, whereas multicellular living organisms are made up of more than one cell. And unicellular living organism have single cell and within their single cell they are able to perform all the life processes like obtaining food, respiration, excretion, growth, reproduction, etc. Like in case of amoeba and paramecium. Whereas in case of multicellular organisms, they have similar basic structures and similar basic life activities, and different shapes and aggregated forms are present in them, and these cells make tissues. Group of these cells make tissues, and tissues perform specific function. They make organ, and organ make organ system, and the different organ systems are present in our body. So by this way you can compare unicellular living organism and multicellular living organism. So what is cell made up of? A cell is a tiny mass of protoplasm which is surrounded by a membrane and is capable of performing all functions of life. A typical cell is formed of three main parts: plasma membrane to create separate environment, or plasma membrane which separates one cell from another cell in case of multicellular organisms. Then very important organelle which is also called as mastering organelle of a cell, which is nucleus. And this nucleus controls all other organelles within the cell. This nucleus also helps in division and formation of new cells from the parent cells. Then the third most important part is cytoplasm, which help in possessing metabolic machineries. All other organelles are present within this cytoplasm only. So let us move on to the next slide. Let us focus on plasma membrane today. Plasma membrane is also known as cell membrane. It is present in both plants and animals. So it is the outermost delicate elastic membranous covering of the cells that separates its content from the external environment and is called plasma membrane. The membrane which surrounds the cell and separates its content from the outer environment is called as plasma membrane. Plasma membrane is selectively permeable, means it selects some of the things to pass across it. It does not allow all the material to go across it or pass across it. So the term selectively membrane is used here. So plasma membrane is selectively permeable, that means it allows entry and exit of some of the substances through it. It is made up of bilipid layer. Bilipid layer means it is made up of two layers of lipid and protein. So big protein molecules are embedded inside the two layers of lipids, and this helps in the transfer of various material in and out of the plasma membrane, or it helps in the transportation of some material in and out of the cell. So plasma membrane helps in entry and exit of some of the molecules or some of the materials inside the cell. And small carbohydrates are attached to this and placed to outer surface of lipids and proteins, and its function is to provide the shape to the contents of cell, and it also protect to the internal environment of the cell, means it protects the cell organelles. It provides particular shape to the cell. It acts as a mechanical barrier in a cell. It is semi-permeable. It helps in endocytosis, that I will explain you later what is endocytosis and exocytosis. It helps in recognition of various materials. How does it chooses that this material, A material is required by me, so it should enter inside the cell. So it should have some recognition center. Through that recognition center only it allows the entry and exit of some of the material through it, not all. Flow of information, and it also helps in osmosis process, cell continuity modified to perform special functions like absorption in microvilli. This is the structure of plasma membrane, where you can see that here you can see that this layer is present and this layer is present, and here small globular structure is there through which two thread like structure are coming, this and this. This is the structure of lipid actually. This is polarized structure of lipid, that is why it is shown here. And one layer is here, upper layer, and the other layer is here, second layer. And in between these two layers you can see big protein molecules. These protein molecules have certain sites here which helps in attachment of the material onto it, and these carrier protein molecules help in the transportation of various materials in and out of the cell through plasma membrane. So this is again one of the picture of plasma membrane. Now let us focus on to transport across the plasma membrane. How this transportation takes place through plasma membrane. Membranes act as a physical barrier between the organelles of a cell and its cytoplasm and its surrounding environment. So on the basis of permeability, these membranes can be divided into three parts, that is impermeable membranes. Some membranes are impermeable which do not allow any material to pass across it. Some are permeable membrane, means they allow both solute and solvent to pass across it. And there are some semi-permeable membrane which allows some of the materials to pass across it. So plasma membrane is a semi-permeable membrane. Now I told you that plasma membrane allows entry and exit of some of the molecules across it or some of the material across it. So it helps in transportation. In cell, there are two types of transportation or two types of transport. Means movement of material. That is active transport and passive transport. Active transport is the transport when the transport is taking with the help of expenditure of energy. Energy in the form of ATP. ATP means adenosine triphosphate. So, when a certain material moves across the plasma membrane with the help of some energy, then that transport will be called as active transport. Whereas the transport in which no energy is required, that transport will be called as passive transport. So substances may pass across the membrane without or with expenditure of energy. Expenditure of energy means they can require some energy for movement of some of the material. So active transport is the transport in which substances pass the membrane with consumption of some ATP, or in this particular type of transport, ATP or the source of energy is required. That is why this is called as active transport. And what is that source of energy in our body? That is ATP. ATP is also known as energy currency of body. And the full form of an ATP is adenosine triphosphate, which is a compound. And it converts into another form, and this conversion releases some of the energy. So that is how the cell gets the energy. When we are talking about passive transport is the transport in which no energy is required. Just because of concentration gradient or the difference of concentration result in movement of some of the materials. There are other type of transport also, bulk transport, when large amounts of substances or food particles are passed across the plasma membrane. The process of bringing the bulk of material from outside to inside or from inside to outside, all these are bulk transport. When something is coming from outside to inside, that time that movement will be called as endocytosis. And when some material which is produced as a waste inside the body and it has to be thrown outside the body, that time it takes place by the process of exocytosis. This endocytosis and exocytosis occurs in amoeba also. For intaking of food, it takes the food from the outside surrounding environment in the form of food vacuole as endocytosis. In the same way, the waste which is generated in its body is expelled or thrown outside by exocytosis. You have already studied about amoeba in your previous classes. So this is a diagram which is showing active transport here, and you can again see two lipid layers, first lipid layer, second lipid layer, and in between that lipid layer there are big protein molecules which are your transport protein or carrier protein molecules. These are big protein molecules. Now again, when we are talking about passive transport, there are again two types into that. That is diffusion and osmosis. In both these types of passive transport, some molecules move from higher concentration to lower concentration. And this movement doesn't require any kind of energy. That is why this movement or this transport is called as passive transport. So let us focus on to diffusion. Diffusion is a process of movement of substances, solid, liquid or gas, from the region of higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration till spread uniformly in the given space. Let's take examples of diffusion from our day-to-day life. When your mother do that daily puja at home, she might use that incense stick or some dhoop batti, agarbatti, something like that. And you know, the place where this agarbatti or dhupbatti is used, at that place, the concentration of that fume or the scent which comes out from these things is higher. And slowly that smell reaches to the next corner of your house. So from higher concentration to lower concentration, the molecules of that gas moves. Let's take another example. You all must have used deodorant and some perfume scents, etc. So suppose if I have a scent bottle here, perfume bottle here, if I will press it here and I will release some of the perfume in the air, then what will happen? The concentration of the gas molecules of that perfume will be higher. So the smell will be very strong here. But soon after some time, I'll see those who are coming from outside, they could also sense the smell. And when they will come nearer to me, they will come to know that yes, this is the place where the perfume was used. So here you can see that the molecules of that perfume moved from higher concentration to the lower concentration. In the same way, when you add some ink into water, you see the place where the drop of ink is put, that part of the water is little more concentrated because more color is there. Slowly you see that color spread in all the direction and entire water turns in that same color. Here in this slide you can see that pink color is used. And initially in the beginning, the pink color was more concentrated in the bottom of that jar. And if I will mix that color with some spoon into that jar, then what will happen? Entire water will become pink. And we can say that molecules of color will diffuse towards the upper side where less concentration of color is there. So molecules move from the higher concentration to lower concentration. Now, importance of diffusion. Diffusion is used in our day-to-day life also, and it is also used for transport purpose in our body. You know that we inhale oxygen and we exhale CO2. So how this CO2 and O2 come in and out of that blood? Through diffusion process only. When you inhale air, that air is rich in oxygen and the oxygen concentration in that air is more as compared to the concentration of oxygen in the blood capillaries which are present around your lungs. So what happens? The oxygen moves from higher concentration to lower concentration. So it moves from lungs to blood through blood capillaries. In the same way, when deoxygenated blood comes, it is rich in CO2. That CO2 is generated as a waste by each and every cell present in your body. So blood carries that CO2 from that cells and that blood comes to your lungs. And that time the blood which is deoxygenated is rich in CO2 concentration as compared to the air which is there in your lungs. So what happens? As a result of this difference in the concentration of CO2, CO2 gas moves from the higher concentration to lower concentration and CO2 moves from blood to your lungs and you exhale out that air. So movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place in your body because of this diffusion process only. You can again focus on to these points which are given here. It helps in spread of different substances throughout the cytoplasm of cell. Osmosis is a type of diffusion where only solvent is allowed to diffuse. Diffusion helps in exchange of respiratory gases between the cells and their environment. What are these respiratory gases? Oxygen and CO2, carbon dioxide. Okay. Transpiration is diffusion process. Flowers spread their aroma through diffusion to attract insect and other animals for pollination. Now let us focus more on to another type of passive transport, that is osmosis. It is quite different from diffusion because here a semi-permeable membrane is required. So osmosis is defined as the diffusion of water or solvent across a semi-permeable membrane from a region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration. Children, you need to focus on each and every word which I am telling you here. That is, osmosis is defined as diffusion of water or solvent across semi-permeable membrane. Underline this somewhere. Then another important point is from a region of higher concentration, its higher concentration, to the region of its lower concentration. Plasma membrane functions as a semi-permeable membrane, which allows some of the material to pass across it. So here plasma membrane, in this diagram also you can see that water molecules are more here and sucrose means sugar molecules are here. Green color sugar molecules are here. So suppose one side there is plain water and other side there is sugar syrup, concentrated sugar syrup, and in between that there is permeable membrane. You can see here this permeable membrane. So what will happen now when two different solutions which have different concentration are separated by a semi-permeable membrane, then to maintain the concentration both the sides, the water molecules will move from higher concentration to the region of lower concentration. You can see here that water molecules are moving from this area to that area, whereas the sugar molecules will move from higher concentration to lower concentration again. So this process will take place till this entire solution will have same type of concentration. Now again you can see the difference between osmosis and diffusion. In diffusion there is no semi-permeable membrane, whereas in osmosis process semi-permeable membrane is there. On the one side of semi-permeable membrane you can see here pure water is there. Pure water is present here. And here what is there? Solution is there. Solution, it can be the salt solution, it can be sugar solution or any other solution. So here the concentration of water is less. Concentration of water is less and here the concentration of water is more. And in other words, we can also say that if suppose it is a salt solution, this one is a salt solution, then I can say this same thing in other language also, other way also, that is the concentration of salt is high here and concentration of salt is low here. So the same thing can be explained in two ways: concentration of water and concentration of salt or sugar or any other thing with which this solution is made up of. So here you can see, to equilibrate the concentration of water, the water molecules are moving from its region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration of water. See what term I am saying? From the higher concentration of water to the lower concentration of water. That means the water molecules are moving from here to here. And this movement is taking place across this semi-permeable membrane. Now focus on to diffusion, where the molecules of higher concentration are moving towards the lower concentration, but there is no semi-permeable membrane. And in both these processes, no energy is required for movement of any molecule. So this is a passive transport. Again, this is an activity for you, children. You can take some of the raisins. You can ask your mother to give you some raisins. Keep that raisins into a water for entire night and next day see what happens to that raisins. The raisins will swell up. If you will see that raisins will swell up, and if you will taste that water in which the raisins were kept, you will see that the taste of water has changed and it has become little sweet. That means what? The content of water, or you can say the water, has entered inside the raisins, whereas the sweetness of that raisin has come outside into the water. So that is an example of osmosis. So in this slide also you can again see how osmosis takes place. It is a passive diffusion in which no energy is required, but here semi-permeable membrane is utilized, or it acts as a barrier for the, it acts as a means of channel for the transport of various materials. So the skin of that resins act as semi-permeable membrane. Now in this slide you can see the differences between osmosis and diffusion and some of the examples, common examples. So osmosis moves through, in this the movement takes place through semi-permeable membrane, and whereas diffusion does not require any semi-permeable membrane. Osmosis takes place in liquids only, whereas diffusion takes place in solid, liquid, gases, all three forms. Osmosis helps plant in absorbing water and maintain stability, animals in transporting nutrients and maintaining water at a cellular level. Whereas diffusion helps in exchange of gases, transpiration and photosynthesis. Again, there is one more slide to understand the differences between osmosis and diffusion more clearly. So osmosis, it is limited only to the liquid medium, and diffusion takes place in solid, liquid and gases. Osmosis requires semi-permeable membrane and diffusion does not require. Osmosis depends on the number of solute particles dissolved in the solvent, and diffusion depends on the presence of other particles. Osmosis requires water for the movement of particles. Diffusion do not require water for the movement of particles.